You people think wearing a nice suit earns you a seat at this table? Gregory Langston's voice sliced through the room like glass. He didn't even glance at Marcus as he held up the thick proposal folder. 2 fingers pinched it like it reeked. Then tore it straight down the middle. The sound cracked like a whip. The torn pages scattered across the marble table, flaring out like fallen feathers. "This is trash," he said, his tone flat with contempt, just like the man who brought it in. A few heads turned. Some eyebrows twitched. 1 or 2 board members stifled a smile. But the room stayed quiet, polished, cold, complicit. Marcus didn't move. Gregory kept going. "I don't care how many apps you launched or how many diversity grants you managed to hustle. You don't belong here." That landed. A sharp laugh came from the far end of the table. Someone tilted their phone up, already filming. A woman in a pearl choker shifted in her seat, amused. Marcus looked down at the shredded proposal. He didn't bend to pick it up. He didn't speak, but under the table, his hand curled into a fist, slow, steady, deliberate. Gregory leaned in, smug. "This board moves billions, not charity cases." They thought he was folding, but Marcus wasn't crumbling. He was calculating. And the man they tried to humiliate? They had no idea they'd just insulted the company's next majority owner. Marcus Tate wasn't always this quiet. There was a time, long before tailored suits and private equity deals, when he used to yell to be heard. Growing up in the back streets of East Detroit surrounded by gunmetal fences and flickering streetlights, silence never got you fed. He learned early that being overlooked was just another way of being erased. But today, in this boardroom of brushed steel and quiet cruelty, Marcus chose silence. Not out of fear, out of power. He wore no tie, just a sharp charcoal suit and an open collar shirt that framed a jaw carved in patience. His briefcase, Italian leather, scuffed at the corners, sat unopened beside his chair. On his wrist, a black rubber watch. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. He didn't need to declare wealth. He just needed them to underestimate him. And they always did. The chandelier above buzzed faintly, a soft electric hum. Somewhere to his left, the espresso machine hissed, like a snake. Perfume hung in the air. Citrusy, expensive, fake. Marcus let it all wash over him. He looked around the table at the men and women who thought they ran the world. Silver hair, Rolex pride, generational arrogance dressed in pinstripes. They spoke in acronyms and mergers. They chuckled over diversity optics, like it was seasonal marketing. He knew this game, knew it better than any of them, because he'd played it from the outside. Built his first startup in a basement with second-hand servers. Slept 3 hours a night. Pitched angel investors, who never looked him in the eye. Raised capital by sheer force of grit while banks denied him loans with smiles. And still, he rose. Not with noise, but with precision. Behind the quiet exterior stood the man who'd negotiated 2 hostile takeovers, buried 3 competitors, and survived enough boardroom betrayals to write a textbook. They didn't know him, but they would. The insult just now, Gregory's words, the shredded paper, wasn't new. It was ancient. It echoed every teacher who assumed he'd cheat, every landlord who asked for extra paperwork, every hiring manager who called him, well, spoken. Like it was a surprise. But Marcus didn't come here to be liked. He came to change the room. And this time, he wasn't walking away. Because before this meeting ended, every single person at that table would have to learn one thing. The man they tried to silence had already bought their silence. The boardroom stretched wide, too wide for comfort, with a 12-foot table slicing through the center, like a runway for the powerful. Mahogany and brass, lacquered to perfection. The kind of surface that reflected not just light, but lineage. High above, crystal chandeliers, dripped with artificial elegance. The light they cast was sterile, almost interrogative. It caught the sheen of Marcus's suit, but also the absence of a lapel pin. The kind that usually declared club membership or Ivy League heritage. He didn't wear one. He never had. The walls were lined with frosted glass panels, etched with the company's original charter. Founded in 1931, passed through generations of the Langston family, like an heirloom. Oil portraits of old white men stared down from gilded frames, their eyes following movement with disapproval baked into brushstrokes. Marcus had stood in rooms like this before, rooms where no one said the word race, but everything about the Decor whispered it. Rooms where silence was polite, but exclusion was policy. Where the coffee was imported. The smiles rehearsed. And the unspoken rule was always, don't forget who built this. And Marcus never did. The scent of cedar wax and polished stone lingered like tradition. The board members sat with backs straight and jaws tighter than their handshake grip. Gregory now leaned casually in his chair. One leg crossed over the other, looking as if he'd just swatted a fly. Someone tapped a Mont Blanc pen against a notepad. Not writing. Just tapping. Waiting. Watching Marcus for a reaction. None came. Instead, Marcus let his gaze trail across the room, to the untouched pitcher of water that no one offered him, to the tray of pastries placed further from his seat than anyone else's, to the line of sight, how every chair was slightly angled toward Gregory, as if the table had a gravitational center. These were details most would miss, but Marcus didn't. He noticed how Gregory had positioned himself so his shadow cast directly across Marcus's notepad. He noticed the way a junior board member, a woman with an open laptop, tilted her screen every time he glanced her way, guarding it like he might steal data through the air. And he noticed how no one stopped Gregory from speaking. No one corrected him. No one intervened. Because in this room, power wasn't shared, it was inherited. And everyone here assumed Marcus had stumbled into it by accident. But what they didn't know, what they refused to see, was that Marcus had mapped this room weeks ago. Not just its layout, but its players, their voting shares, their weaknesses, their pressure points. He wasn't the outsider. He was the storm waiting just outside their skyline. And today, that storm had finally stepped through the door. Gregory didn't like being ignored, especially not by someone he thought beneath him. So, when Marcus didn't respond to his jab, didn't flinch when his proposal was torn, didn't even so much as blink, Gregory escalated. He reached across the table, snatched Marcus's untouched notepad with 2 fingers, and flicked it onto the floor like a napkin. It landed face up, clean handwriting, perfect margin alignment. A single phrase circled 3 times. Control equals leverage plus silence. Gregory laughed. Oh, how poetic. He drawled, standing slowly. Let's save the quotes for Instagram, shall we? Then came the final act. He stepped around the table, slowly, deliberately, and planted one hand on Marcus's chair, gripping it like a leash. This, he said, loud enough for the entire room, is what happens when we lower the bar to include unqualified ambition. He tugged the chair back an inch, just enough to jolt Marcus off balance. Not a fall, not violence, but calculated disrespect, the kind that echoed. Someone gasped, barely audible. Across the table, a woman's nails stopped clicking against her phone screen. Another board member shifted uncomfortably, as if their spine had gone rigid. A man in a checkered blazer adjusted his tie, trying not to make eye contact. No one said a word, not even Marcus. But the silence wasn't cowardice, it was strategy. Gregory, satisfied, gave a final shrug and turned his back. I think we've entertained this performance long enough. He moved toward his seat, the sound of his leather soles clicking like punctuation on the moment. That's when the youngest person in the room moved, a junior analyst, early 30s, sharp bob cut, laptop still open, looked directly at Marcus. Her face held no amusement, no arrogance, just a flicker of something dangerous in rooms like this. Doubt. She didn't speak, she just looked. And that look said, I saw everything. Marcus exhaled slowly. The tension in his shoulders didn't release. It focused. His hand drifted to the side of his chair, brushing against the leather handle of his briefcase. Not to open it, not yet. Just to feel the weight, to remind himself that he still held the one thing no one in that room had considered. Time. Because this room believed power shouted. But Marcus knew, real power waits in silence, until the room begs to hear its voice. It was Carla Ruiz who broke the chain of silence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't stand. She simply cleared her throat. Soft, deliberate, just enough to cut through the fog of passive complicity. I am sorry, she said, her voice steady, crisp, But I believe Mr. Tate's data projections have already outperformed our legacy portfolios for Q2. Heads turned. Some slow, some reluctant. Gregory froze mid-step. Just shy of his chair. He didn't look back. But the tension in his shoulders pulled taut, like a wire being stretched too far. Carla didn't flinch. She didn't address Gregory directly. Instead, she tapped the corner of her laptop. It's in the briefing packet, page 70. 4. The projected ROI from Tate Strategic Holdings is 11.3%, compared to the current board managed return of 6.1%. Silence tightened. Even the ambient buzz of the chandelier seemed to dim. Gregory finally turned. Thank you, Miss Ruiz, but I think we're all aware of how numbers can be manipulated. Carla blinked once, then looked him square in the eye. They weren't manipulated, sir. They were ignored. That landed. Not like a slap, but like a slow, sharp breath drawn through the teeth of everyone present. The kind that said, "She's not backing down." A man 2 seats down slowly flipped to the packet. Another followed. Paper rustled. For a moment, the balance in the room shifted, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but it moved. Gregory sensed it. His jaw twitched. "You are out of line," he snapped. "This meeting is not about." But Marcus finally moved, not to speak, not to argue, just to sit back, calmly, leaning slightly into the backrest, like he had all the time in the world. And that's when the shift became real, because the moment Gregory raised his voice, and Marcus leaned back without a word, the entire room realized something. The man being shouted at had the composure of control. And the man shouting was starting to lose it. Gregory saw it too. He gritted his teeth, turned toward Carla again, but didn't speak. She lowered her gaze just slightly. But the damage was done. The spell had cracked. No one laughed anymore. No one smirked. And one by one, board members began flipping open folders, rereading lines they'd skimmed, glancing, uneasy toward the man they'd dismissed. Gregory Langston had built his career on control, on tone, posture, leverage, but right now, he wasn't speaking like a strategist. He was reacting like a man whose grip was slipping. "You know what?" he said, stepping forward again, voice louder than necessary. "Let's not pretend this is about numbers. Let's talk reality." He walked around the table slowly, circling Marcus like a shark that smelled something beneath the surface. This company was founded on vision, on heritage, not on PR stunts wrapped in venture jargon. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. Gregory kept circling. "You think a few buzzwords and a nice logo makes you ready to sit at this table?" He sneered. "You don't even understand what this room means. You don't wear the right tie. You don't use the language. Hell, you probably walked through the front door thinking that was some kind of achievement." He stopped behind Marcus's chair, too close, too deliberate. Then he leaned forward, close enough for his breath to touch Marcus's ear. "Do yourself a favor," he hissed. "Leave now, before you embarrass yourself even more." The room stilled. This wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't banter, wasn't negotiation. It was an attempted erasure, made physical. And Gregory sealed it. With one last gesture, he reached over Marcus's shoulder, grabbed the glass of water in front of him, and poured it slowly across the table, letting the stream bleed into Marcus's documents. Page after page soaked, numbers smearing into oblivion. A soft gasp echoed. Carla stood up halfway from her chair. A man near the door muttered, "Jesus Christ." But Marcus still didn't move, not even as the water reached his hand. He lifted it slowly, shook off the droplets, and placed it flat on the table again. Eyes forward, expression unreadable. Gregory straightened, breathing hard now, not from effort, but from something deeper, panic masquerading as dominance. He expected rage, expected a shout, expected Marcus to lose his composure. But instead, Marcus looked up and smiled, not wide, not smug, just enough. Enough to make Gregory flinch, enough to make the rest of the room sit back in their chairs, enough to feel the air finally shift. And in that razor thin silence, the room understood. Marcus wasn't staying quiet because he was weak. He was quiet because he was ready. Marcus reached slowly for his briefcase. Not rushed, not theatrical, just precise. The lock clicked open with a soft snick, barely audible over the tension humming through the room. He pulled out a single folder, midnight black, edges gold. Stitched. No logo, no label, just authority. He placed it gently on the wet table, exactly where Gregory had spilled the water minutes earlier, and opened it to a single page protected by plastic. Then he pushed it forward, toward the center of the table. No words, just that single movement. Carla leaned forward first. Then the junior board member across from her. Then two more, and then the silence shattered. Not with noise, but with stillness. A charged, frozen, collective breath. Because at the top of the document, embossed in gold ink, were 7 words. Controlling shareholder, Fay Tate Strategic Acquisition Fund, and underneath it the signatures. 3 of them, including one they all recognized. Board member Harold Price, a founding family member. Gregory went pale. His lips parted slightly, as if forming a protest that never left his throat. Marcus finally spoke, not loud, not angry, just firm, centered, final. 3 months ago, I began acquiring your equity partners, he said quietly, one by one, quietly, legally. He slid a second page forward. Purchase orders, timestamps, cleared wire transfers. I now control 41.7% of Langston Hale Group Holdings. Mouths opened. No sound. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked Gregory in the eye for the first time since the meeting began. You told me I didn't belong in this room, he said. Pause. Measured breath. You are right. He stepped forward, past the chair, past the soaked table, past the ghosts of all their assumptions. I don't belong in this room, Marcus said softly. Because now I own it. No one laughed. No one moved. Even Gregory stayed rooted. Lips parted, frozen in a silent gasp that never quite became a word. And for the first time that morning, the room belonged to Marcus Tate. Marcus didn't sit back down. He didn't need to. The chair behind him had become irrelevant. Just like the ones currently occupied by half the board. He pulled a small matte black card from his breast pocket, sleek, titanium, weighty, and placed it beside the ownership documents. The card bore no name, just a gold monogram, TSF, Tate Strategic Fund. Carla's breath caught audibly. Everyone in corporate finance knew the initials. A ghost fund, anonymous, relentless. The one behind 3 hostile takeovers in the last 18 months, including a tech unicorn, a private aviation firm, and a medical group. Every time, the pattern was the same. Silence, face strategy, face surrender. And now they realized who had been behind it all along. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply unfolded another page. This one showed voting rights distribution. I also hold proxy agreements with 2 minor partners, he continued, his voice still quiet, still sharp, which brings total voting control to just over 53%. Eyes widened. That number, over 50, wasn't just technical. It was biblical. It meant decisions. It meant leadership. It meant Gregory Langston's reign had ended. 5 minutes ago, Gregory's face flushed crimson. His lips trembled. But no words came. He looked around the table, but no one met his gaze. He was alone now. Marcus turned toward the others. I didn't need to be in this meeting, he said. I called it. He scanned the room slowly, making sure every eye met his. You weren't evaluating me. I was evaluating you. A beat. Then some of you failed. No yelling. No slamming fists. Just truth delivered with the stillness of someone who'd waited too long for this moment to waste it on theatrics. The power didn't come from his voice. It came from the weight of what no one could undo. The document, the card, the silence. Carla sat down slowly, her face unreadable, but her shoulders straighter than before. Across from her, a senior partner shifted in his chair, suddenly aware that the notepad in front of him was blank. He hadn't written a single thing down. He hadn't thought he needed to. Marcus took one final step forward. In 10 minutes, he said. Legal will arrive with the revised board structure. Another pause, and I'd suggest clearing the seat next to mine. He looked directly at Gregory, then turned his gaze to the junior analyst, the one who'd said nothing, but had dared to look, to someone who knows how to listen. And with that, Marcus Tate didn't just own the room. He redrew its architecture from memory. Marcus checked his watch. 9:41 a.m. Right on schedule. He tapped once on his phone, and within seconds, the boardroom doors opened. 3 people stepped in. 1 woman in a dark gray suit. Elegant. No nonsense. Laptop already open. 1 man in wire. Rim glasses carrying a leather case marked with the Langston Hale seal. And a third older, quiet. The only one who didn't make eye contact with anyone as he moved directly to the corner of the room and plugged in a slim drive to the presentation screen. The Langston board turned as one. Gregory took a step back. Marcus didn't introduce them. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who they were. Legal counsel. Compliance. Forensic accounting. The woman in gray, Nia Caldwell, spoke first. We're here to initiate the immediate transfer of executive authority as per Proxy Clause 14C. She glanced up from her screen, effective retroactively to 7:0 this morning. Gregory's voice cracked. This is outrageous. You can't just... You were notified, Nia said flatly. Not even looking at him. By registered email, twice. The man in glasses opened his folder, extracted a single page, and slid it toward Carla. Confirmation of delivery. Time. Stamped. Signed. The screen behind them flickered on. An organizational chart appeared. The Langston Hale Board of Directors. With names, photos, and a blinking red icon next to 4 of them. Under review. Next to Gregory's, access revoked. The man at the corner desk tapped a few keys. Gregory's phone buzzed. His watch lit up. His laptop dinged. Then, nothing. His devices went dark. Across the room, more alerts began pinging. Email logouts. Server access cuts. Clearance suspended. It wasn't just symbolic, it was surgical. Marcus remained silent throughout. He simply watched. Like a man watching a forest being cleared to lay foundation. And then, quietly, he spoke. There will be a full audit of every internal complaint filed in the last 5 years, he said, especially the ones marked resolved without documentation. A tremor passed through the room. A senior partner whispered, "Oh God," because they all knew what that meant. The settlements, the cover-ups, the emails buried under layers of not the right time. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He just kept going. The D budget will be moved out of PR, he said. It will report directly to me. Someone coughed. No one looked up. He turned to Nia. Suspend Gregory's retirement payout. Pending ethics review. She nodded. Already in motion, Marcus folded his hands. And as of today, I want every intern's exit interview read. Personally, start with the ones who didn't come back, because if the foundation's rotten, you don't redecorate, you rebuild. Marcus stepped to the head of the table, the seat Gregory once claimed as his throne, and didn't sit. He stood there like a judge behind the bench, not because he needed the height, because the message had to land above them. This company doesn't need a rebrand, Marcus said, his voice firm but calm. It needs a reckoning. He let that hang for a moment. No one looked away. No one interrupted. He continued. Effective today, every senior executive's bonus structure will be tied to retention rates for employees under 30, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Another scribbled something down, pretending it mattered. The performance reviews that mysteriously penalize maternity leaves? Gone. A whisper rippled across the room. A woman in HR looked down at her lap. Marcus didn't pause. The complaints that didn't meet threshold, but never reached legal, forwarded for independent audit. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It listed 10 names. The interns, we ghosted. The assistants, we underpaid. The analysts, we overworked then fired for culture mismatch. They all get called back. He locked eyes with the man who laughed during Gregory's outburst earlier. Some of them will be offered leadership tracks. The man paled. The D committee will no longer be a Friday afternoon formality, Marcus said. It'll be staffed by people with veto power. People not afraid to say no. Nia nodded. Already making notes. And the next gala we sponsor, Marcus added, will include the communities we pretend to serve. But never invite. A beat. Then he dropped the last piece. I am replacing the board seat reserved for legacy equity with a rotating seat voted on by employees. Gasps now. Not dramatic, but sharp. Someone at the end of the table whispered, "He's rewriting the charter." Marcus heard it, smiled. Good, let them know. This isn't about one meeting, he said. It's about unlearning a culture that confused tradition with entitlement. He leaned forward. This place doesn't get to celebrate Black History Month if it can't even retain black talent. No one had anything to say. And in that silence, dense, uncomfortable, honest, Marcus finished. Change doesn't need approval. It needs execution. And from this moment forward, nothing about Langston Hale would be business as usual. Marcus looked across the table at faces that now held less arrogance and more awareness. Not guilt, not yet, but something had cracked open. He rested both hands on the table. No documents now. No files. Just truth. I know what rooms like this are built to do, he said quietly. I've stood outside them for most of my life. He looked at the chandeliers, at the polished walls, the portraits staring down in oil and gold. They're built to make people like me feel lucky just to be let in. He smiled, not bitterly, but with gravity. But I am not lucky. I am deliberate. He turned to Carla. To every black analyst who spent 2 years doing someone else's job with half the credit. To the intern who left because no one remembered her name. To the assistant who was told to calm down in meetings but called intimidating in her review. This table is now yours too. His voice didn't rise, but it resonated. Because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redefinition. Here is a reason people like me are kept outside these rooms, Marcus said. Not because we lack the talent, but because once we're inside, we change the rules. No one looked away. Even Gregory, still frozen in disbelief, was listening. And we're not here to take over, he paused. We're here to rebuild. A beat, then softer. And when the next Marcus walks into a room like this, I want them met with questions about their ideas, not their place. For a moment, no one moved. Even the air seemed to hold still, not out of fear, but out of something rare in a boardroom. Respect. Then Marcus reached down, picked up the wet contract Gregory had torn earlier. The one soaked, wrinkled, nearly unreadable, and held it up. I am keeping this, he said. Frame it. Maybe. He gave a slight smile, a reminder that what they try to destroy is often exactly what they fear. But the story didn't end in that boardroom. It exploded far beyond those walls. By noon, the footage had leaked. No one knew who filmed it. Some said it was the junior analyst. Others said it was a paralegal walking past the boardroom door. But what mattered wasn't the source. It was the story. The clip hit social media like a lightning strike. Marcus standing in front of the board, quiet, controlled, holding up a soaked contract and saying, I don't belong in this room, because I own it. Within an hour, the video had 2.4 million views. By nightfall, it was trending across platforms. Number Black CO, number Boardroom Justice. Number Ontharoom news anchors dissected every line. College professors quoted him in lectures. Podcasts played the audio loop on repeat like scripture. But Marcus, he didn't speak to the press. He didn't post a reaction. He went back to work. Not in celebration, but in continuation. Because for him, this wasn't a finale. It was a model. Weeks later, Harvard Business School added his acquisition strategy to its MFA, a casebook. 1 semester later, an entire course on silent power, leadership beyond volume, was built around that moment. In Detroit, a group of teen entrepreneurs printed his quote onto hoodies and sold them to fund their first mobile app. In job interviews across the country, young black professionals invoked his name not as legend, but as leverage. And the boardroom? It didn't forget. They remodeled it, tore down the portraits, replaced them with impact data. That seat next to Marcus? It rotated every quarter, open to staff, interns, janitors, coders, anyone with a stake in the work. And Gregory, he was never seen in public again. His name faded from the plaque by the door. Replaced with one word, legacy. Not his, Marcus's. Because what he built that day wasn't just a company reclaimed. It was a room redesigned. And the torn contract, still framed, still hanging behind Marcus's desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. They tried to shred his worth on paper. And he rewrote it in stone.